Hey everyone, so happy to be with you here today. I'm Dr. Chelsey Hauge with Positive Parenthood, and today we are talking about priming for high stress events. Now, what is a high stress event, you might wonder? And just, think about the kids that you work with in your life, and there's many high stress events. Life is that way, right? There are many high stress events in our life, and so we certainly want our kids to be able to navigate those and really to navigate across a range of stressors, a range of emotions, a range of situations, and be able to be regulated through those. So that's what we're talking about today. When you think about what might be a high stress event for the kids or the young people that you work with, it could be something like fair where there's pressure on them, there's lots going on, there's lots of people around, there might be people they don't know, unexpected stuff could happen. It could be a new academic situation. I mean, it really could be a family dinner that the child is nervous about attending, or maybe going to a new restaurant if we get out of this pandemic, or anything like that that's causing some kind of worry. Or it could be an event that you know historically has been hard for the child or group of children. So, I mean, that could even be grocery shopping if you are a parent with a couple of little ones. Grocery shopping could be a high stress event, and you would want to definitely prime your kids for grocery shopping. So whether that's big events, going to summer camp, starting school, whatever it is, priming is a tool that's going to bring the stress down so that your kids have more capacity to cooperate. So if you think back to our very first time together when we talked about stress and the way that stress manifests for our children, stress makes it really hard to cooperate. Impossible, in fact. So when you are stressed, you have less capacity, like all of your energy is being devoted to taking care of that stress, or sucked into that stress, and so you have less capacity to do the right thing. And for many of our children, they really cannot when they become too stressed. Now, a little bit of stress, of course, can be very positive and good for development. But, for some of our kids, like a big crowd of people coupled with not knowing what's going to happen, coupled with some pressure to perform, it creates a highly volatile situation. And you know this from working with kids in some of these situations. So when you think about those, I want to say that there's a real burden placed on our children and young people when there's something that's totally new in a way that they're expected to perform, and they might not know what that way is. So sometimes I like to think about like the first day of a new job. So if you think for yourself as an adult, if you've ever started a new job, which I'm sure you have, and it's like you have the start date, but you don't really know that much else. Maybe you're super excited, but you're probably nervous, right? New people, new situation. You don't totally know what to expect. You might not even know what your schedule is. And so you arrive, you're nervous, maybe you spill your coffee, that makes you more nervous. And those nerves are going to inform the day. And sometimes for some of us, like a supervisor handing you a calendar or a schedule is going to be something that calms your nerves. They're kind of priming you, right? They're letting you know how the day is going to go. Or maybe there's somebody who comes and tells you what some of the customs or the traditions of the place that you're now in are, and that might be very calming. I remember I was doing a series of workshops at a school a couple of years ago, and there was some real particular cultural practices around how people were greeting each other that I didn't know, and I was a little nervous, and I was so grateful that somebody shared those with me so that I could behave in the way that was like appropriate in this community. So that's also priming. So what priming does is it lets everybody know what is going to happen and how it's going to go and what the right thing to do is. So if you remember back to when we talked about positive opposites, we talked a little bit about pro-social. And what pro-social is what to do instead of what not to do. So most of us, when we're working with kids, we say a lot about what not to do. We say more about what not to do than about what to do. And priming flips that. Priming is going to sort of take us out of our own perspective, put us into the kids' perspective, and help us to really think about what they need in order to be successful. So priming is really breaking something down. So for a lot of kids, when you have a high stress event, one of the major kind of issue areas is going to be transitions. So transitions already place a high burden, a high cognitive, a high social emotional burden on our kids. They have to close one activity, they have to shift their attention, they have to sequence, they have to make a motor plan. There's all kinds of stuff that has to happen, and areas where we sort of kids get caught. And so if you've already got that going on with transitions, and then you also have a loud crowd or high expectations or lack of clarity around what's going to happen or how to be, it's just a recipe for challenge. And so this is a really good time to think about slowing everything down and priming. So let's imagine a situation. Let's say you are going from one activity to the next. You're moving a group of kids, and some of the kids easily move. They finish up what they're doing and they get their backpacks and they move on to the next thing, but you've got one or two that are not doing that. And so I want to really prime them in order to be successful. So what they're telling me, if they're not moving with the group, is that they need more support. And priming is one way to do that. So when you prime them, you're gonna, sorry for that weird light in my face. When you prime them, you're gonna let them know, you're gonna break it way down, and you're gonna let them know, like, this is what's gonna happen. Now we're gonna be done with this activity. Okay, done with this activity doesn't mean moving to the next one. It means closing this activity, then standing up, getting your shoes on, getting your backpack, putting your water bottle in your backpack, and then moving. So one of the core issues that I see for transitions and when adults try to move kids through really high stress events is that most grown-ups automatically transition. And when a kid is having a hard time and you're trying to move somewhere, most adults will speed things up if the child is doing unsavory behavior. I think that comes from just like, I want to make this yucky moment as short as possible. And it's a fundamental mismatch because it's actually the opposite of what our kids need. Our kids need us to slow everything way down. And this may be true of a kid who's typically fine in not a high stress situation and just a regular everyday, but becomes overwhelmed in a high stress situation and needs more support. And so you're gonna do that by breaking everything way down. Now, if they're not following, that means it needs to be broken more down. This also requires high quality of presence from the adult. Okay, so I'm gonna give you an example from my own life from this afternoon. To just kind of illustrate how small things need to be broken down. So I had a group of 5 kids and they were on the playground and we were going to finish playing and head up to the house to have a little bit of lunch. And it's like we have 7 minutes left, and when you let them know they have 7 minutes, you gotta get in there. So either you need to make eye contact. So I went up to each child and let them know we've got 7 minutes left. And I called them by name, so I knew they were hearing me. I think a lot of times we think we're priming, but the kids aren't really paying attention. So 7 more minutes, and then 5 more minutes, and then 3 more minutes, and then 1 more minute. And then I'm gonna put a timer on. And each time I'm going to each child, right? Reinforcing that we're gonna finish up here and move on. And then the timer is gonna go off, and I'm gonna rely on a lot of different tools. Okay, so number 1 is we're not going home because I said so, right? We're going home because the timer went off. So I've primed them for that, and what that does is it keeps me off the battleground. It keeps me away from having to get into these struggles, fights, I don't wanna go home kind of things, because it's a neutral thing. It's just the timer. The timer went off, so that's why we're going home. Okay, so the timer goes off, and then I'm gonna use still more positive tools. So then I'm probably gonna count down in a familiar and melodic way. Now, we have not talked in this series about melodic intonation, but it is a tool that works for little kids, big kids, even adults. And it's basically using a familiar and consistent kind of sing-song patterned voice so that things become automated easily. It's much easier to cooperate if you use a melodic voice. So I'm gonna count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I always do it that way. And the kids do it with me, right? And then they know, okay, now it's not now time to walk up and go home. Now it's time to pack our backpacks, and we do throw the trash from the snack away. So we're really breaking it down. If you have a child who is not transitioning, you need to break it down further. And they may need other extra supports, a hand on the back, some visual support, some auditory support, more timers, a picture story. If you know that you're going into a high stress, so that's kind of how to prime in the moment. Now, if you know you're going into a high stress situation, like you know this is going to be hard for this child or this group of kids, then there are many things you can do in advance, priming the night before, even a couple of days before, even like reading the same story every day for a week or two before, to let them know how it's going to go. So an example of this is that I recently worked with a family who had a child who was going to soccer, and things were different because now we're in a pandemic and everybody's wearing a mask and the parents can't walk up to the field, which all really disrupted this little guy's system. And so they primed him with what I would call a social story. So a social story is literally a story. I helped them write it, picture on each page, not very many words, broken very down, so like one sentence tops, that's gonna let him know how it's gonna go. So for him, it was like, I'm gonna get in the car with daddy. I'm gonna put my soccer bag next to me. We'll wear my cleats. When we get to soccer, we're gonna drive up and we can listen to one of my favorite songs while I watch the other kids play. Then it will be time, then it's gonna be time for daddy to open my door and I'm gonna climb out and I'm gonna carry my soccer bag up to the field. And then when I'm done, after practice, I get to walk back down and daddy will be waiting for me. So he had the whole story. And they practiced that many times. And in fact, after practicing it a couple of times, it had many bad drop-offs. They called me and they said, oh my gosh, it worked. He did all the things. He went up to soccer and there was no tears. So, they really focused on priming him for what was for him a very high stress event. Now you can do this for older kids too. A social story can help, can be helpful for a lot of kids. Kids can make it with you. Big kids can make it with you. If you think about, like I've worked with families that have children who don't want to get onto an airplane. That's another one where you want to do like maybe a practice run. And we're going to hold the boundary. Like we are going to go to soccer, or we are going to go to fair, or we are going to get on the airplane, or we are going to participate in X, Y, and Z. So the boundary is firm, but you're going to kind of shore the child or the young person up with all kinds of practice ahead of time so that you're not walking into the situation without, having practice and having done kind of a run through of how things are going to go. You will notice that for the first couple of times, it will probably feel like whatever you're doing is more about the transition than it is about the event. So if you were practicing going grocery shopping for 3 or 4 or 5 times, it might be more about like getting out of the car and getting the cart and then getting back out of the store than it is actually about getting groceries. And that is okay. That means you're doing it right, okay? It might be more about how we're going to get along and how we're going to move through these different spaces and like what's going to happen and who's going to be waiting for you than it is about whatever activity the young person or child is doing at the fair. And that's also okay. That means you're doing it right. So just really remembering to slow everything way down, to move the child, focus really carefully on the transition or on any movement, letting them know, like, here's the schedule, here's what's gonna happen, giving bite-sized pieces so that the child or young person knows what the next step is. So we're just trying to do sort of the next best step, right? With lots of praise. And we talked about this a couple of times ago, but especially in these kinds of moments where there's a lot of stress or a child is really struggling, you want to really praise even fragments of whatever it is you want to see more of. So if there is a small piece that a child is doing right, praise that. So breaking things down, priming, lots of praise. You can use visual supports that do not have to be fancy. It could be stick figures on Post-its. You could use words if you're working with older kids, written words. You can use a gesture to tap where the next thing is. You might use language like next is, first this, then that. Now X is all done. We're going to X. Okay, so simplify, 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 slow way down, and give a lot of visual cues, auditory cues when you have a child who responds to that. Less words though, fewer vocabulary words, fewer words. Most adults like so many words, so verbal. And most kids, fewer words, better. Easier to understand, easier to comply, easier to cooperate. So please do think very hard about priming for any time that you know is going to be problematic, as well as for any high stress events that are coming up for your child or the kids that you work with. It's been absolutely wonderful to be with you. Again, Dr. Chelsey Hauge with Positive Parenthood. Take good care.